So today we're going to talk a little bit about how you can make money from free apps and games by using the Microsoft Advertising SDK. In order to get started, the first thing you need to do, of course, is download the Microsoft Advertising SDK. The current version, as of this webinar, is version 5.2.6, and I've posted the long URL as well as a much shorter tiny URL, which is tinyurl.com add SDK 526. And so you can hit either one of those, and that'll enable you to download the SDK. And within that, you're actually going to get the pieces that you need in order to do ads for Silverlight apps as well as XNA games. Within the download, you get several things. There's the SDK documentation in the form of a CHM file. There's the Silverlight ad control, which is a GUI control that you can drag and drop onto your design surface if you're doing a Silverlight app. There's also a set of DLLs that pertain to Silverlight projects. So you've got Microsoft.advertising.mobile, .mobile.ui, and .mobile.ui.design. And then if you're doing XNA, then there's also Microsoft.advertising.mobile.xna. For those of you who are not familiar with the programming models, or rather the differences in the programming models between Silverlight and XNA, there are a few differences, the key being, of course, that XNA is driven by a game loop, where Silverlight is your more conventional drag and drop controls plus the flexibility of XAML, and more traditional form type programming in the sense that you're dealing with events and you're writing code to respond to various events like clicks and stuff like that. So it is two separate DLLs, and you just need to point to the one that you need in order, for the game project or the app project that you're building. A couple of terms I wanted to go over up front. These are two of the key parts. Whether you're doing Silverlight or XNA, you're going to need an application ID and an ad unit ID. And what these are, which I'll show you in just a minute in the PubCenter site, these are what map to the actual information that you provide PubCenter. So when you first want to set up your app or your game to do ads, you need to visit PubCenter and sign up, and then you're going to create an application, and I'll walk you through all of that in just a moment. And then you're going to create an ad unit by specifying, say, the size of whether you want a banner ad and what size you want to use and what categories of ads you want to use. And the end result of this process is that you get an app ID and an ad unit ID, and then you provide these two key pieces of information to your app or your game, and of course to the ad SDK, and that in turn pulls the appropriate ads based on the IDs that you provided. So we'll go ahead and jump into that. So PubCenter is located at pubcenter.microsoft.com, and before you can do any ads at all, you have to register with PubCenter. I'm not going to walk you through the registration process because it's actually pretty self-explanatory. Just visit the link, hit register. You can log in with your standard Windows Live ID, and then you sign up, and it might take a day or two to actually get approved and everything for the site. But once you're in, then you can go in, and right now we're looking at the Setup tab, and so this is where you would typically manage the applications that you want to show ads in. So right now I've got a bunch of apps that I've been working on that are all ad supported, and I've grayed out the application ID because you don't want to use that anyway, because you'll just be making money for me and not you. And while that has a certain cool factor to it for me, it doesn't really do much for you at all. So what we have here, this is just the general area that you see when you log in after you're set up. And if we click Register an Application, you're going to get a very simple form. Literally, you just type in the name of the app that you want to register with PubCenter. So at this point, you're not doing any code. You're not building the app yet. I mean, you may have started building the app, but you're not doing anything complex here. You're just telling it what app is going to be using ads. So we'll say we type in sample application, hit save, and then you come back and you see you've got your sample application, And approval typically takes literally a few seconds. I have yet to enter anything in that didn't get approved because, as I said, at this point all you're typing in is a name. So once you've got that, then it's going to generate an application ID, which you can see right here on the bottom. And again, it's grayed out, but it won't be grayed out on the website. Don't worry. PubCenter. There's a question here: is PubCenter only for mobile Win 7? So the PubCenter site actually does handle stuff for web pages as well as Windows Phone, although it seems like a lot of the web page stuff is either disabled or just not accessible, because all I've ever been able to do is set up Windows Phone stuff, although it does periodically mention, like at the top here of the screen here, manage your sites and applications. So it does kind of imply that you can do website stuff with it, but I've only ever used it for Windows Phone. So once you have your application ID, then the next thing you're going to do is you need to create ad units. And so ad units are the actual ads that are going to show up in your Windows Phone app. Okay, it looks like we have a comment here says that they are no longer accepting websites. So then in that case, they need to update their page, but it looks like it's phone only. So anyway, so ad units are the actual ads that are going to show up in your phone app or game. And so here I have some that I've already defined, and this page gives you a little bit of information regarding how many impressions the ad has had, what the click-through ratio percentage is, how much they're paying, and if you've added the ad to any channels. And so channels we're not going to really get into today, but basically you can add multiple ad units to a channel, and it makes it a little easier to track what's going on. So if we want to create a new application ad unit, we would just click right here, and then you're going to get a page that looks pretty much like this. You're going to name your ad unit, and I called mine sample ad unit. You're going to pick some categories, and there's a bunch of different categories here, everything from automotive, technology, travel, fitness, a whole bunch. You can pick up to 3. Now fortunately they do have some grouping here, so instead of picking 3 different automotive categories, for example, I could just hit automotive all, like you see here, and they've got the wrap-up categories for pretty much every category they offer, and there's a pretty decent list. But with only having 3, some of them are pretty obscure. I mean, you get really fine-grained stuff, but the problem with that is that not all ad categories are created equally. Okay, you can easily pick some ad categories that never show any ads, and that's obviously kind of counterproductive to the reason you would show ads. So play with it. Don't be afraid to set up multiple ad units and try different ad units while you're doing your development, or go in and after you've created them, you can always come back in and change the categories. But you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to play with the various categories and figure out what shows the most ads and what's going to show the most ads that are relevant to your app or to your users. Then the next thing you're doing here is you're choosing the ad unit format. As far as the phone goes, 480 by 80 is pretty much your only real choice. I haven't had much luck with the smaller ones. It seems like most of the ads use 480 by 80. I haven't gotten any to show at some of the other sizes because I think those were targeted more for websites. And then the 480 by 80 works really well because, of course, if your phone is in portrait mode, it's 480 wide, and 80 is roughly 10% of the vertical space of your screen. So it's a nice banner that you can just stick right up at the top of your screen, no problem. So once you've selected your ad format and your categories and given it a name, then you can hit save, and of course it'll show up back in that ad units setup window. So here you can see the sample ad unit highlighted in red that we've just created. And then if we look at the summary page again, it's got our sample ad unit as well as the sample application that we created a few minutes ago. There is another question. Let's see. Do you know when PubCenter will be available in Germany? I do not. I don't work for Microsoft. I just work with their stuff a lot. The current thing that they're telling everybody is just that it's available for U.S. companies and U.S. residents only. They have not announced any dates for support outside of the US at this time. So again, you can get to all of this by going to pubcenter.microsoft.com, sign in with your live ID, create an account if you haven't already, and then go in. You're going to create your application and then your ad units. I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've learned from working with these, and then we'll jump in and do some demos. So when you add a new ad unit via the PubCenter site, it can take up to half an hour to start showing up in your app or game. This is a big deal if you don't know this because you think you're doing something wrong. You add your application ID and you add your ad unit ID to your code, and you run it and nothing happens. And when you don't get an ad, you don't get anything. So it's not like there's an empty box there that says no ads. It just doesn't show up at all. And like I said, it can take up to half an hour. So keep that in mind. After you create them, if you're doing a lot of testing and nothing's showing up, you may not necessarily have done anything wrong. Next point, as I mentioned before, 480 by 80 seems to be the best option overall for ad format on the phone. Not all ad categories are created equally. As I mentioned earlier, some categories don't have any ads. Some are just too specific. They're not as general appeal. Also, if you're using location, which is my next point here, you can actually drive ads based on location. And this is great for focusing your ads, but it also greatly reduces the variety of the ad shown. So if you narrow your location down to a specific area and there's not a lot of ads for that area, you may not get any ads, or you may only get one or two that get shown over and over. And finally, and this goes back to the question that was just asked, registration and payment are currently restricted to the U.S. Residents and businesses only. As far as how long is it going to be like that, I don't know. Typically, I'll find out whenever they announce it. I don't have a whole lot of insider knowledge on that kind of stuff. Hopefully, it won't be too long, but honestly, I do not know. Okay, so let's do some demos. I'm going to do a couple of Silverlight demos, and then we'll do the XNA demo. I should be able to squeeze them all in. So the first one, we're going to do the Silverlight demo using the ad control. And so as I mentioned before, this is a drag and drop control that you just put in your page and set a couple properties and off you go. So the first thing we're going to do is we've already got our project set up, so we need to actually drag the control over. So if we look in our toolbox, we've got our ad control here. Now this assumes that you've already downloaded the Ad SDK from the link I showed earlier. You've installed it, and so it's going to stick some pieces out there where your projects can find it. So we're going to take the ad control and we're going to drag it. Oh, come on, don't do this to me. Let's see if I can squeeze it in there. No. All right, let me move this thing over a little bit and try that again. Take the ad control, here we go. We're going to drag it into the form. Come on. Bear with me here. It's being a little weird. Let's try that again. Did we get it that time? Hard to say. Yes, we did. All right, let me drag this thing over. Sorry about that. All right, now, come on. Good times. Okay, so now we've got our Ad SDK, and we'll go ahead and tweak the size to make sure it's the right size in just a little bit. Our height is 80, and our width should be 480. There we go. Resize this. Make it a little easier to see what's going on. Okay. And the next thing we do is we're going to set some properties. So we're going to right-click on that, go to our properties, and we're going to pass in the test ad unit ID and the test application ID. And so for add unit ID, we'll go right here, and that's going to be image 480_80. Now anybody can use this add unit ID. This isn't something I created. This is strictly for test mode. And then our application ID right below that is going to be test client. And again, just like the add unit ID, this is something Microsoft provides so that you can test out whether or not you've actually got ads working before you push it out live. And so you can switch it between test mode and regular mode at any point while you're developing, and you will actually get impressions for ads once you switch it over to real mode, but you don't want to do too much of that while you're in testing, so you can rely on the test mode once you know you've got it working. So at this point, that's literally all there is to it if you're using the actual toolbox control, and you just drag it on and you put in those two pieces of information. And if we go ahead and run it, uh-oh, what happened here? Hang on a moment, let me switch over. That's a little odd. Kill that, try again. Wonder if it's got something. Oh, yeah, I accidentally put two of them in there. Not a problem. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, let's run that again. Sorry about that. Here we go. So this is a simple Silverlight ad using the ad control. Looks like we have another question here. Somebody's posted a link. It says, finally, Microsoft Advertising PubCenter will be available in 18 countries by the end of the year. So there you go. That's good news. Let's go ahead and close this out. And I'm actually going to run that again because I was getting some weird screen artifacts on my side. I don't know if you guys were or not. So let me run that again real quick just so you can see it. Hang on. Stop. Let's try that again. Here we go. And so after about a half a second or so, it'll populate the test ad. Now, the next thing I want to show, go ahead and close this, and make sure this stops, is I have another one where we actually look, instead of using the control directly, we use the SDK, and we do everything programmatically instead of just dragging and dropping. And obviously this may appeal to a different group of people than the ones who just want to drop it in and set a couple properties. So in order to integrate an ad control programmatically, the first thing we need to do is we need to add a couple of references to our project, or one right now and then one in a little bit when I show you location. So we're going to add the Microsoft.advertising.mobile.ui reference. Scroll down. Here we go. Microsoft.advertising.mobile.ui. Add that. And we come back over here, and we're going to add a using statement as well. Microsoft.advertising.mobile.ui. And then in the code, we're going to create an instance of the ad control, and we're going to set the properties. So we're going to go to our constructor here. Open that up some. And the first thing we're going to do is, just for our own memory's sake, we're going to copy in this. And so this shows us our test client for the application ID and the image 480 by 80 for the ad unit ID. And then we'll go ahead and instantiate our ad control. I'll just paste that in so you guys don't have to watch me type badly. So here we're setting our application ID to test client, our ad unit ID to 480 by 80, and the auto refresh enabled to true. And after that, we also want to set the width and height to make sure we are compatible with the banner we've selected. So we'll set our width to 480 and our height to 80. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to actually add the add control that we've instantiated to our XAML. Well, we're not going to add it to the XAML, we're going to add it to the layout, and we're going to do that programmatically as well. So if you look at the XAML, you can see that we've got a couple of options here. Drag this over and shrink this down a little bit. In the XAML, we've got a stack panel and a grid that are part of our layout route. So the stack panel is effectively item 0 in this, because this is just definitions. So we've got our stack panel, which is item 0, and our grid, which is going to be item 1, or child 1. And so what we're going to do is we'll go back in here, and after this, we're going to instantiate grid, and I'll explain this in just a moment. Children. So we're going to pick the grid that's called layout route that's already in our XAML, and we're going to look at the children of that. And in this case, we're going to grab child 1, not child 0, which of course that is our grid. And then we're going to add the add control that we just instantiated above. So we'll go ahead and do that. So now, if we run this, uh-oh, what did I do? Or did I leave out? All right, hang on just a moment. Oh, sorry. That should be parentheses, not square brackets. Very good. So we'll switch over to the emulator. And so just like before, we have created an add control. We passed in the test client for our application ID, and then the image 480 by 80 for the add unit. We've set the width and height. Hang on, is there a different parameter that needs to be set if the add is going to be 480 by 80? I assume you mean 80 by, so it's currently 480 by 80, width by height. I'm guessing you mean 80 by 40, so if you're going to be running, say, in landscape mode instead of portrait mode, then you would just change the width and height of your add control. And then in XNA, it gets done a little differently, but I'll show that as well. Okay, so at this point, you've seen how to just add the control from the toolbox, set a couple properties. You've seen how to do it programmatically. One thing we haven't looked at is how to drive ads by location. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and stop this. And hang on 1 second. All right, in order to do that, we need to add another reference, this time to system.device. So we'll go over here. Add reference, system.device, and that's because we're going to be using the GeoCoordinate Watcher class, which uses the GPS to tell us more or less where we are so that we can pull ads that are local to a specific area. So we add the reference, and add it, yep, there it is, and then we're going to add a using statement, of course. System.device.location, and then up here we're going to add a GeoCoordinate Watcher. Got a feeling it's not CNF. seeing it. Did I leave something out? I want to do it. That's another place. Yeah, it should be good. Okay. And then in our constructor, down here, we're going to instantiate the coordinate watcher. So GCW equals new. Yeah, there it is. It's showing up. GeoCoordinate Watcher. GCW.start. And GCW.position changed. And so this is an event that's going to fire. So whenever we get some new data from our GeoCoordinate Watcher, it's going to fire an event, which we're going to grab, and we're going to call our GCW position changed event that we're about to create. Or not event, sorry, method that we're about to create. GCW underscore position changed. So we'll go right here, and we'll, just so I can spare you the agony of watching me type, let's go ahead and paste that one in. So what we have here is we've created a method that will get called whenever our GeoCoordinate Watcher gets some new data, and it's going to have some coordinate information which it's going to pass in as E. So once we grab that, we'll go ahead and stop our GCW because we don't need to keep it running all the time. And we'll grab the latitude and the longitude of our position, pass those back to our add control. Now in order to do that, we actually need to move add control out of the constructor, otherwise it's not going to know what add control is. Let's go ahead and delete that here and move that up here. Okay. Now at this point, we should be able to run it, and you won't, unfortunately, you won't really see any difference in the emulator because we're still using test ads, and even if we were using real ads, you wouldn't necessarily know they're local. But what this gives us is it's going to work just like the previous example, because it's going to show the test client, or it could show real ads, but it's going to take that geo information, the latitude and the longitude, and it's going to pass it into the add control, and then the next time it fetches an ad, that ad is going to be tailored to the location you're in. Now the downsides to this, as I mentioned before, is if there aren't any ads for that location and in that category, then you might not see an ad at all, or it might pull an ad that's not specific to your location if there's one in that category. So you have to be really careful when you start drilling into very precise or very narrow categories, and when you start working with location, you run the risk of not necessarily showing very many ads, and sometimes no ads at all. So it is definitely a risk. Go ahead and run this. Just to make sure. Uh-oh, I didn't do something right. All right, what did we miss? GeoCoordinate Watcher. Oh. Right. I'm not sure what happened there. It looks like I'm also missing a semicolon somewhere. Hang on one moment. Oh, well, here we go. It's that. Namespace connect. Methods. Oh, ha! I see what I did. I put it outside of the class. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to fix that real quick. Yeah, that should definitely be inside the class. That makes a lot more sense. Yes, and looks like Chad pointed that out as well. You're in your namespace instead of the class. Hi, Chad. Thank you. All right, so at this point, if we run it, like I said before, you're not going to see any difference because we're just using the test ad, but that would be how you would pass your location. What would be the advantage of using those kinds of targeted ads? Okay, well, that's a great question. They don't necessarily generate more revenue, but they can be more relevant to your users. So as more and more people start to take advantage of the Microsoft Ad Network, if you are using the app and you're out and about and there is someone in your immediate area with an ad in a category that app supports, then it'll see it. And so at this point, the apps become more relevant to your users. They're not necessarily more relevant to you because you're not located where your users are in most cases. Your users are going to be all over the country. But this gives you the ability to provide more focus to the ads. But again, it runs the risk of possibly delivering or not delivering ads, or delivering a very limited selection of ads if you are in highly targeted categories as well as location targeted ads. If we enable location ads, do they give more revenue? Not necessarily. Now, we have another comment here. They will consume more battery due to the GPS usage, and your app will not be used as much due to battery consumption. Possibly. So if you only use it when you first fire up the app, then you're actually not using that much battery, because it'll only be on, for a very brief period of time. You fire it up, you get that first set of data, and you turn it off. And so you're not having a constant drain on your battery. And in general, most people don't necessarily know which apps are draining the battery on their phone. It's been my experience that people tend to blame the phone or the OS more so than a specific app. And there are certainly some bad behaved apps out there. But if all you do is just grab a set of coordinates when you first fire up the app, because presumably you're not walking or driving while running this app, and if you are walking, you're probably not walking far enough to get a whole new set of location data, it should be okay. All right, go ahead and close this one, and then we'll do the XNA demo. I got another question here. Can you put a full page ad between two user actions? If so, what parameters do you send for the ad network to know it is a full page ad? I don't think a full page ad is currently a supported option with the Microsoft Ad SDK. It's not one of the supported sizes, so there's no 480 by 800 ad. And I don't believe you can do custom sizes for your ad units. Now, you could certainly display ads. Let's say you have a trial mode and you want to display a nag ad to get people to buy the full mode version. You wouldn't even really use Microsoft Ad SDK for that. You could just have interstitial ads that show up in between actions and drive people to the marketplace if you wanted them to register your app or something along those lines. But there's not built-in support for full page interstitials. Okay, so let's close out this. Stop this one, and let me grab my XNA project. So if you've seen the previous webinars, you know that XNA has a different programming model than Silverlight. And so we have to do things a little bit differently. We're not going to use the actual control from the toolbox because XNA doesn't really have any concept of those kind of UI controls. So everything's going to be done programmatically. So to start with, we need to add a reference to a couple of spaces. So let's see here. We need to add Microsoft.advertising.mobile.xna. This one right here. So now remember, with Silverlight, we were adding the UI name. In this one, we're specifically grabbing the XNA DLL. So we'll add that. And then since we're going to do some location again, we'll go ahead and add system.device as well. And we'll add a couple of using statements. System.device.location. And Microsoft.advertising.mobile.xna. Now we need to add a few variables at the class level. I need to make sure I don't stick them in the namespace level by accident. So we're going to add our GeoCoordinate Watcher. And we'll call that GCW. So that's null. We're going to add our ad manager. So this is a little different than the or the ad component like we have in Silverlight. I cannot talk and type at the same time. Ad manager. Oops. Ad manager. And we're going to add banner ad. How did I do that? Hang on. Ad. There we go. Banner ad. And then we need to add, and in this demo, I should have mentioned this earlier on. We're actually going to show some real ads in this one, but since I don't want you guys using my ad IDs, I've actually kind of hidden those away and created a dummy class, which I'll show you guys in just a second. So I'm going to copy this in. 1 second. Okay, and so I've got a couple of different ad unit IDs that I've created and an app ID, and then I've got my keys file, which these are not the real ad IDs, don't get excited. I've created a class called fake keys just for showing you guys. I've switched some of the letters and numbers around. But this is, other than the fact that they're fake, this is a good way to do it in your app, is you can kind of isolate this piece from your game class, and then as you add in new ad units and you tweak various attempts to figure out the perfect blend for your advertising, you can just change it all in here without having to dig into your game class. And so I actually have a different class which contains my, hang on, let me close that up, contains my real keys right here under do not open, which obviously I'm not going to open. So once we have these in place, then we're going to need to set up, if we wanted to do a test ad, we could just add a couple of constants to support test mode. So we've got our image 480 by 80 and our test client, just like you've seen before. And then, so we're not going to be in test mode right now, so we'll go ahead and add test mode equals false, and we can use that in a little bit. And because this is XNA, we're going to be drawing stuff to a rectangle. We'll call that our add rectangle. We're going to set rotation mode to automatic. And then we're going to set our active ad unit. Okay. Now in our game constructor, we're going to go ahead, open that up, and we're going to instantiate our GeoCoordinate Watcher. So I'll just put that right in here. Looks like a good place. And just like before with the Silverlight way of doing it, it's pretty much the same. We're going to instantiate our Coordinate Watcher, we're going to start it, and then we're going to set an event handler which fires our GCW position changed method, which is going to grab the location data and then turn off the Coordinate Watcher so that we're not killing the battery. And so in order to do that, we need to add a method. And I'll come down here at the bottom. Add that in. So just like we're doing it a little bit differently because the XNA DLL actually supports a location property instead of a latitude and longitude individual properties. I actually like this way better, personally. So we grab our data, stick it in E. We're going to go ahead and stop the GeoCoordinate Watcher, and then we set our location property by creating a new instance of location and passing in the latitude and longitude. So we just dump that in there. And then I've got a few extra properties here. I'm setting the border to true, and I'm setting the color of the border black. And then if rotation mode is anything other than automatic, then I tell it to go ahead and request that next ad. Now, at this point, we need to go back into the constructor. So we're not quite done up there. And we're going to add some support for Ad Manager. We're going to instantiate that. So Ad Manager equals new Ad Manager. And we're going to pass this. Oops, man, I really cannot type today. And the app ID. And then as part of our instantiation, we're going to set the test mode property to our test mode variable. So this will tell us are we in test mode or not, and as you know, right now we have that set to false. And then our add rectangle is going to instantiate it to a new rectangle, and we will give that a 004880. So that's going to put it at the top of our app, which is going to be in portrait mode, of course. And then we're going to set our active ad unit. And this isn't something you necessarily have to do, but if you've got a bunch of different ad units that you've defined and you want to play with different ones to see which one's giving you better results while you're doing your testing, then this is a good way to do that. And so we set our active ad unit to ad unit. In this case, I'm going to do ad unit 3 because we get pretty good results with that one. And then we're going to add our Ad Manager, which the way they did it in XNA, Ad Manager is actually a component. And if you remember from the previous talks on XNA, there's two ways you can do stuff. You can either dump everything in your game class or in separate classes, or you can build game components. And game components get called as part of the loop. So when you hit your update method, the update method of your game component is going to get called. And if you have a drawable game component, then when you hit the draw method, the corresponding draw method is going to get called in the drawable game component. And so this, of course, does display something on the screen, so technically it's a drawable game component. So what we need to do is we need to add it to the components collection of our game class. And so we're going to add manager. All right, and then we need to add something to our load content method. Go down here. This is all boilerplate stuff, so we'll add this in. We're going to actually create the banner ad. And I will paste that in for you real quick. All right, so here's where we actually take the Ad Manager component. We create the ad by passing in the active ad unit, which was the one we just set up above. So we're going to use ad unit 3, our ad rectangle, which this is where the ad is going to be drawn into the rectangle, and then we told the rectangle it was going to be located at 004880, which is the very top of the portrait screen. And then rotation mode, which we set up above, and we set that to automatic, which you can see right here. And then once we have our banner ad, I'll go ahead and get a little fun with it. The XNA gives you a few extra properties that you don't necessarily have to play with in Silverlight. So maybe I want to draw a drop shadow. So we'll set that to true. And again, with the banner ad, I'm going to set the border color to black. So we use our set of colors, and we pick black, and then we set draw border to true. Okay, now assuming I didn't mistype anything, we should be ready to roll. Oh, one more thing I want to mention before we fire it up. So you should have noticed that we did not add anything to the update method other than just the boilerplate code that we get when we create a project. And we didn't add anything to the draw method. So the reason for this, like I mentioned before, is because this is a drawable game component, XNA knows, since we added it to our components collection, XNA knows that anytime we fire the update method or the draw method in our game loop, which these two methods are getting called over and over and over as long as we're in that game loop, this last line here, base.update, is going to go out and call the update method of all of our game components. And this last line in the draw method, base.draw, is going to call the corresponding draw method of any of our drawable game components. And so regular game components, of course, don't support a draw method because that's typically for background processing, whereas drawable game components, it's assumed that you're actually going to put something on screen. So we don't have to add anything at all to our game loop because our control, or not control, excuse me, our component is actually handling all that for us. And the order that stuff gets called in is based on the order that you add it to the components collection. So if you have 2 or 3 different components, you can figure out which order they're going to be called as far as their update or their draw based on the order you add them in to the collection. So that may help you down the road if you run into a problem with timing. So we'll go ahead and hopefully fire this up. Oh, what did I miss? Probably not going to get this working in the next couple of minutes. So we'll go ahead and switch out of that, and I will put an update in my blog regarding what went wrong or what it was replaced with. In the meantime, let's go ahead and we already talked about the problems we can run into as far as add categories and all that. So why don't I go ahead and open it up to questions, and if you guys have any questions, then I'm happy to field those as best I can. While we're waiting on questions to pop up, I did want to mention again that we are giving away a Windows Phone. It's an HTC Surround, and all you have to do to get that is go to my blog, which you can find here at www.blogismaximus.net, and the most recent post on there is a list of all the webinars in this series. And if you leave a comment on that post and tell me what you thought of the series and maybe what you liked, didn't like, which ones you saw, that sort of thing, after a day or two, after we've had a bunch of comments, then I'll pick one at random and let that person know that they've won a Windows Phone. And so that's all you got to do. I'll contact you, and then you can send me your address, and you'll get a phone. So any questions at all regarding the Silverlight side of the house, or even the XNA stuff?
Hey, Chris, I don't see, obviously, any questions. You kind of answered. Well, there you go. There's one.
How about the add categories, which seem to do well? So it really depends, you know. I've had good luck with some of the technology categories. It seems like the travel categories have a lot of ads. Like the health categories have a few. You really just have to kind of play with them, pick different categories, and run your app and see which ads show up and which have a lot of variety of ads and which ones don't. They're not always going to, the big mistake I made, I guess, when I was starting is that I would try to pick ad categories that were relevant specifically to my app or to my game. And unfortunately, there won't really be a lot that are necessarily relevant to your app. And so you need to pick categories that you think are going to generate a lot of ads and are going to be of interest to your users, whether or not they're specifically relevant to your app. And so just play with the different categories and give that a shot. I had a couple questions. Where can I leave the comment? Again, that's at www.blogismaximus.net. And if you go to the topmost entry there, you'll see a list of all the webinars in this series, and then there's a link you can click to actually show the comments, and you can just add one there. When and where will you announce the winner of the Windows Phone? Well, today's Thursday, so let's say end of day Friday. That gives everybody about a day and a half. End of day Friday, I will post a new blog post indicating who won, and then I will also attempt to contact that person if possible through the comment they made. Otherwise, I'll post it, and if you check back Friday and you're that person, then drop me an email and we'll get you taken care of. One last thing real quick where is it? So this is what the phone looks like. It's a HTC Surround running Windows Phone. It has not ever been used, brand new, so it has not been upgraded to Mango or anything like that, if you're wondering. But we'll get it out to you as soon as we have a winner decided. The Ad Manager, okay, here we go. Here's a comment. The Ad Manager was in the March SDK. If you use the June SDK, it is deprecated. Okay, well, that answers that. That explains why that didn't work. I could have sworn I had it working earlier today, but as I was playing with stuff, I may have accidentally overwritten something. So good to know. And I will post an update. I have an article in my blog that talks about doing ads in XNA, so I'll make sure to update that as well. Thank you. And by all means, check out the previous webinars in this series. Most of them actually went a little smoother than my XNA demo. So, okay, we have a question here. What is the blog URL? So one more time, that's www.blogusmaximus.net, and you can see it on the screen here. It's the third line in blue right here above my cursor. I don't know if y'all can see my cursor, but anyway, it's at the bottom of the screen. It's blogusmaximus.net, and just go there and leave a comment, and no junk comments, please. I mean, let's get some real feedback here as far as what you thought of the series and any other topics you might like to see, or what you liked or didn't like. Can you show the Ad SDK link again? Absolutely I can. Hang on. That's going to be right here. So the current version is version 5.2.6, and you can get to it via either one of these links. There's the long link or the tiny URL, which is Ad SDK 526, nice and easy to remember. Do we have any other webinars scheduled this week?
Hey, Chris, sorry, I was just typing that tiny URL into the chat window so people could copy and paste it because they can't grab it off your screen. Yes, we do have, well, we don't have any, you're our final webinar of this week, but we do have webinars that are coming up and are scheduled through September. You can register at devexpress.com/webinars. A quick peek into next week, next Monday, July 25th at 10 a.m., ASP.NET, how to show a tooltip using the pop-up control with ASP.NET evangelist Mehul Harry. And then Tuesday, July 26th at 10 a.m., DevExpress welcomes Peter Myers of SolidQ, presenting Taking Your Application Design to the Next Level with Analysis Services Data Mining. This presentation is targeted at developers with an interest in data mining and equally for non-developers interested to understand and evaluate what data mining could achieve for them. And there is no requirement to have any background or experience with data mining technologies. And then Wednesday, July 27th, getting started with extra reports for LightSwitch with reporting evangelist Seth Wara. So that's what's coming up next week, and you can register again at devexpress.com/webinars. You do have one more question in there, I think, Chris. It says, what are competitive ad filters, from Robert?
Honestly, I have not worked with those, so I'm not sure what specifically the impact of those would be. I can look into it and post something in the blog.
Okay. Well, that looks like it's it. So everybody, obviously, head over to his blog and leave a comment and feedback about what you thought about this webinar series, and maybe we can bring Chris back to do some more.
Terrific.
All right. Perfect. All right, so good luck to all of you looking to win that Windows Phone. And again, if you missed anything from this webinar or you want to review any of the previous 6 webinars, they are all available on the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. Again, thanks so much to Chris for joining us and for this entire series. Thank you all, and thanks for choosing DevExpress.